Okay, it's being recorded now. Sorry, Bonnie.
That's okay.
Sorry, Bonnie. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Sure. So there was this continuum with the Transect. So what was decided is that instead of having this concept plan that laid out every single lot and what kind of lot it was, there would be a regulating plan, and there was a general concept of where housing would go and what types of housing, but there was some flexibility within these, what they called transects. So for instance, if a transect allowed a combination of small lot residential townhouses and let's say stacked flat duplexes within that area that was identified as a transect on the project site, you might be able to shift some of this around. And it's actually worked well, but because parts of phase one, there were items that were shifted around to that end. So you have this form-based code, and there are several documents that are part of this smart code. And the smart code also includes design guidelines, both architectural and the building and lot types. So the building and lot types are, it's almost like a mini zoning within zoning. It establishes what minimum lot sizes can be depending on the lot type. There was the carriage, cottage, village, manor, estate lots. They each had their own set of bulk requirements, meaning the design standards of how big that house could be, how it was placed on a lot, where the parking would go. And then you had it for the multifamily as well. There's also architectural design guidelines. So there were a series of architectural styles that would be allowed within the project. They had to somehow be related to one of those architectural styles. And then I think more recently, possibly in the 2015, what got enhanced were the landscaping guidelines, and how each individual lot, there would be a certain standard for the amount of landscaping that would occur. Performance standards we're going to deal with separately. They're somewhat related to the smart code, but that's really more engineering related. So we have the smart code, which is the overall almost like mini zoning document in the same way the town has zoning. It's its own outline of zoning, what uses are allowed, what the parking requirements are for a use. You have design guidelines related to the building and lot types, and then you have the architectural guidelines, and then you have the landscaping guidelines. So from my perspective, I thought what we would first do is go through the smart code language and look at the red lines that are proposed. And some are more significant than others. And if Larry can, maybe Larry can join in and kind of give his reaction to, you know, the implications for making some of these choices and changes. So I'm going to share right now. Let's see here, screen 2. Share. Can you all see this?
Yes.
Okay, and I believe this is what I sent you the 2015 version, I believe, earlier this week. So this is the smart code, and just like your zoning code, it talks about authority and that it regulates Tuxedo Farms. It's part of, it regulates essentially the development. Interpretation in the same way you'd have in a zoning code, you know, some general interpretation language as to how to interpret various provisions of the code. And this probably is one of the topics that we want to kind of sit and focus on. When the special permit was crafted, the special permit flows from the town board. It doesn't flow from the planning board. It's not something where you have your zoning and someone goes to the planning board to get subdivision approval or site plan approval. Now, the board may recall you would go to the ZBA for special use permits. That role is now with the planning board, kind of for one-stop shopping. In this instance, this special use permit has always been administered by the town board. And because of the size of the development and because of the extent to which it was reviewed, decisions were made, mitigations were established, conditions were established, the town board in the past has always wanted to hold kind of tightly to how this project is developed. And it did allow certain limited waivers that the town board felt would not have an effect overall on the concept and the program and the character of the development. And so if we go into this 1.33 and 1.34, it was very explicit in terms of what the planning board is allowed to grant. Sorry, this talks about the waivers that are allowed, but 134 specifically indicates what is not allowed to be waived. The town board did not want building uses to be waived because they didn't want the planning board suddenly introducing a use that was not flowing from the special permit and all the analyses that were done. So in other words, it didn't want suddenly for something that was going to be residential to be an industrial park. That would be a major change. And so that was something that was not waivable. Building height was another aspect of the project that the town board did not want the planning board changing. The concern being, if this was supposed to be a 2.5, 3-story development, it doesn't suddenly want to find that there were 6-story buildings going in. So building height was definitely not to be waived. Minimum lot dimensions, and minimum side setbacks, maximum lot coverage, maximum impervious coverage. This is all related to the individual lots. And the town at the time did not want to see the minimum lot sizes shrinking, because I think the minimum lot size for a village lot might have been 5,000 square feet, and it didn't want to suddenly see 3,500 square foot, single family lots. So, again, this was a situation where a waiver was not allowed. Side setbacks, that was simply having, a building relate to the side yards. So side setbacks means how far is the building from each side lot line, and it wanted to keep a certain minimum so that you had space between buildings. Maximum lot coverage, didn't want that to increase beyond what was allowed, again, to ensure a certain amount of greenscape about the buildings. Maximum impervious curb coverage, that's the same thing. The lot coverage would have controlled or controls the building size, the footprint of it, and the impervious coverage controls the pavement and the building together. Maximum gross floor area, there was this relationship of the size of the house relative to the lot. And again, the town board wanted there to be a relationship of how big a house can be on an individual lot to ensure that, again, a particular character is kept, that it's an attractive neighborhood. Permitted building types within a transect zone. This was very important. So the transect zone was set up to say, okay, within this area, you're allowed these specific types of uses. So if you went farther out from the center, the commons area, you might be allowed estate lots, but the town didn't necessarily want, let's say, adjoining another neighborhood for there suddenly to be multifamily housing. So the town did not want to allow these changes in the permitted building types within a transect zone. And then you have the thoroughfare right-of-way width in excess of, now applicants proposing in excess of 2 feet. The thoroughfare right-of-way width is the right-of-way width for each of the roads within the development. And because most of the roads, other than the spine roads, are privately owned, the town did allow, and the applicant has this road hierarchy of roads can be narrower if they are serving a smaller number of lots. So if it was a small lane, a private lane, there are 10 houses off of it, that right-of-way width and that pavement width could be less than, let's say, a spine road that was going to carry a higher volume of traffic. And the roadway hierarchy also had requirements for whether you were allowed on-street parking, whether you had to have sidewalks. It's a whole streetscape program. One of the most important aspects of a form-based code is you're trying to create a community, a walkable community with a center, with form-based codes. When I envision what this would create, if we were thinking of living environments, I always, in my mind, I seem to go to Ridgewood, New Jersey. The smaller lots, a particular style of housing, sidewalks, some of the roads are tight. You have the center of Ridgewood, New Jersey, which is their mixed-use center. This is kind of the same thing, but on a smaller scale, on a neighborhood scale, but trying to create that sense of community and a walkable community. So these are the revisions that the applicant is proposing. And then so it says planning board is hereby authorized during its site plan and or subdivision review, which is what the planning board would review, to grant a waiver or waivers to the design standards. And again, with language, we have to be very specific because the smart code and the design standards actually, depending on which terminology you use, it could refer to many things. So we have to be specific exactly what we're talking about when we talk about design standards. Is it the entire smart code? Is it just the architectural design guidelines? Is it the building lot and type? We just probably need to tighten that up. On a case-by-case basis, provide the planning board finds justification for the grant of such waivers on the following specific grounds. So the applicant is proposing that the waiver is a result of a site or design condition unique to a particular development site and not otherwise common within the development area. That is proposed to be removed. And the whole idea of granting the waivers was that it wasn't something just to be done, but it was to be an outcome of a difficulty that was encountered, whether it was rock outcrop, whether it was really I think the environment and the terrain of Tuxedo Farms, because it's not an easy site depending on where you are. So those were sort of the specific conditions, from my perspective. Larry, I don't know if you're on, if you want to kind of weigh in on this.
Yes, I'm on. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the point you made is the correct point. I mean, the purpose of the waiver provisions was to limit the ability to grant waivers except on a case-by-case basis for items that are, the result of unique circumstances that, weren't contemplated or not necessarily contemplated at the time the design standards were granted. They were never intended to offer a blanket kind of a ability to change something on a global scale kind of thing. So it's important that at some point we get an explanation of what's going on here and ask the question why that language was struck. In contrast to what we just explained. So at some point in time, we're going to want to hear from the applicant to address that.
Do we want to hear, I don't know if the applicant wants to offer that now or not. But that really is where we are, sort of what was the intent? Because a change is made and we may not understand why the change was made, and there may be a better way of handling the situation that still keeps this provision, but allows some flexibility that the applicant may need. So I think we need to understand intent.
Yeah. Or if the applicant listening to us, understands the intent of this better, it can just reinsert the language, agree to reinsert that language. But if the applicant does not want that language, I think we at least need an explanation as to why that's coming out.
Hey, Bonnie, this is Mitch Newman with Lennar, and we're happy to do it either way. We can either identify issues and respond to you as we go, or prepare something in response, in a written response after the meeting. Really, your pleasure. We go either way.
I would defer to the town board. Town board, would you like to hear from the applicant? Since we're having this dialogue and it is a workshop, sort of what the thinking was?
Yeah, if it'll help expedite, but sometimes people need a little time to ponder. But if you want to give us an initial response, that's fine. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd like to hear the reasoning behind some of these things. And then I think at some point we'll still need a formal response to comments, but
I agree.
I agree. I think, I don't know how to respond if we don't understand, why they want these changes.
Yeah, and I think that's a general theme throughout with all the changes. I mean, to understand why they're being requested. So as we did at the last meeting, we had a kind of a more of a dialogue back and forth. We should continue that, especially with these things as well. So if one of you guys want to step to the forefront and address the rationale for your proposed changes of the waiver provisions here, that would be, I think, beneficial for everyone to hear.
Okay, and we can, and I'll be happy to step to the plate, and we can actually do both. I can take a swing at giving some background or an explanation, and also, if helpful, at the end of the day, perhaps submit our thoughts on each item if it's helpful in writing. But let's start and see where we land. So on the first couple of items, which is, as Bonnie pointed out, 1.33 and 1.34, the theory or the idea was that we know that we have your code requirements, the zoning requirements, I might call them, and we know we have a concept plan, but we know that as we go through the actual hardline engineering, that things may come up, whether it's rock outcroppings or a simple design of a street or a curve in the street that may create a scenario where something might not fit the exact minimum side yard, for example. So rather than have to be in a situation where we lose a lot or just can't design something, or have to come back to the board for a revision, we wanted to see if we could create the opportunity for the planning board to have some leeway on some of these items. And as Bonnie pointed out, we didn't dare touch permitted building uses or building heights. We anticipated that those were items that would not be up for discussion at the planning board level. But we did want to focus in on those typical design items and keep them as minimal deviation as possible. For example, minimum side yard setback or deviation maximum, if the planning board would be so inclined to grant that waiver, would be only up to 2 feet. So if we were in a situation where a curve in the street resulted in a setback being 3 feet, we simply could not ask for that waiver. We'd either have to come back to the township, to the town, or we'd have to design around it. So that was the big picture as to what we were doing. In terms of 133A in particular, we could definitely work with Bonnie on fine tuning that language as opposed to taking it out altogether. I see upon reflection that we could probably live with at least a part of that, and I think there's absolutely middle ground there.
Well,
Brad, you're muted if you're talking, Brad.
Thank you, Bonnie. I just to echo what Mitch said on letter A, I think the rationale there was the word unique seemed to create a sort of a higher standard that we were trying to relax some. So I agree we could probably come up with some different language, but we didn't want a waiver to be held to only if it was a unique condition that's particular only to this site. So to the extent that's not the intent, I think we could come up with some alternative language. So for example, this rock on this site, there's probably rock on other sites. We didn't want a waiver request to be denied because rock outcroppings is a common development feature.
It might just, go ahead, Michelle, or I'm sorry.
It was,
Not sure who
it was actually Jay. So
Jay.
if I understand, your concern is that you're reading this as saying we'd only give you a waiver if it was a condition that was only present on a single site. That one site's got, I don't know, missile silo, and so that would be a reason for a waiver. But if there were 2 missile silos, we would not give the waiver because it wasn't unique.
That's right.
Yes, that was we were perhaps over lawyering it or overthinking it, but that's where our heads were when we saw that word.
I'm an engineer. I know exactly where you're coming from.
Okay.
I'm not not a lawyer. I think the idea is that the intention, and correct me when I'm wrong, Larry, the intention of this clause is that we're not going to give a blanket, we're not going to allow the planning board to give a blanket 2-foot waiver for every side yard. We want you to come and explain why this side yard needs to be changed, and then they can look at it.
Absolutely. And we'd also have to satisfy that criteria of 133, what was B, C, D, E, meaning it can't cause an environmental impact or a nuisance. So the words that we left, nuisance is certainly vague enough to give the planning board the ability to say no for a variety of reasons. But there's still some meat on the bones, so to speak, as to
Yeah.
what they can say yes or no to.
I think
Again-
you have, I think you have to understand that when that language was originally crafted and drafted, it was for a primarily single-family development where there were individual lots. You know, you had the case-by-case basis language that you know we recognize could have site conditions that were unique to that lot that needed unique treatment for that particular lot via a waiver. And we were willing to consider that.
Yeah,
This
and,
is-
and that might be a justification for a waiver in a particular instance, but there might be others that aren't driven by necessarily a site feature, a physical feature, but may be driven by other design considerations. So again,
Well,
I think
yeah, but there, you know, that there you need to be more, you know, you need to be more specific about that, I think. Because if you're going to have a waiver provision in general, it can't be carte blanche, okay? So when you say something like it might be a design feature, that could mean anything. We have no idea what that means.
and that's why we in 134 we put some specificity in. Again, the whole idea was to give the planning board some flexibility or leeway without having to run back to the town board every time there was what we would consider a minor deviation, so long as it didn't result in a significant impact, a nuisance, or an inconsistency with the special permit or the preliminary plan. That's the general intent. So in 134, we did put some upper limits on how far the planning board could go before we would have to come back to the town board.
Okay, but in that case, when Mitch just explained that, and he started off with 134, he spoke about in a what is essentially a unique circumstance in my mind. So maybe what has to happen is that idea, however it gets crafted, that idea of waivers not being a blanket authority for, you know, changing the design of the development, but considered on a case-by-case basis resulting from a particular circumstance. Okay, I won't use the word unique right now, but a particular circumstance. That is the concept on all of these. And if you want to build, that it's up to the town board whether they want to accept a cap that, you know, in 1.34 on how far the planning board can go, but that's fine. But the idea is, as I understand it, is case by case basis resulting from a particular circumstance at that site, which dictates the need for this waiver.
All right, I think that's fine.
And Larry, just to be open about it, if we wanted to add a bump out room, a Florida room, a side room to a home, and it intrudes in the side yard setback, it's not because of a rock outcropping, it's because of a design desire. The board would then look at that and say, well, Lennar related, explain why there's a particular circumstance that you want to do this. and explain that it will not cause an environmental impact, an unsafe condition, nuisance, and explain that it's consistent with the design intent. So we'd have a bit of a hurdle to get there if it was simply to add a room to the side of a home. And I might anticipate the board might say no, but at least this gives me the ability to have the conversation.
Well, you can always have the conversation. Yeah, I mean, with the town board for sure. But I mean, again, the idea is if you were doing that, if you wanted to do that and encroach, if you're doing a whole row of townhouse units and you wanted to, and your design plan is to pop out a Florida room or whatever and encroach into the yard area as a result of that across, 12 units, so to speak, that's one thing. If it's an isolated instance, that's another thing. So I think some of that is dictated by the continuing evolving nature of the design effort here, and where that may stand at the moment. But we don't want to be put in a position where where design standards are fixed and we're constantly waiving them, having reacting to either planning board or town board reacting to requests for waivers.
Understood. I think we're on the same page.
That's the idea.
Okay.
And town board members, please weigh in as well, because I'm speaking here, but it's your
I'd be happy to. I mean, this is Ken. I think I'm unmuted. Yes, I am. So yeah, I'm understanding, if it's one lot and Mitch, a customer, was requesting something other than you mentioned a bump out room or anything like that. If it's for one lot, as opposed to this is going to change the design for every product of that type, that's different appeal, a different ask. If it's one property as opposed to all models of that style. Over.
Correct.
Well, I guess this is Michelle. I guess it depends on the case the possibility you're bringing up of an extra room in the side yard setback. It depends what the setback is.
But in any event, our max deviation would be 2 feet.
Yeah.
You're right. It depends on what the side yard setback is, but we did build in that cap. So even if the planning board is inclined to say yes, my limitation on my ask, so to speak, is 2 feet, and their limitation on their ability to say yes is that same limitation.
It does bring up a
think-
question I had about, oh, sorry, Bonnie, but, the size of the lots. I've seen many different numbers as to what the width of the lots are. And so I think once we understand what the lot sizes are, that might be easier to see if there's enough room for those waivers.
Right, I think, Michelle, that's the point I was going to bring up, and exactly to that point. Lot coverage, if it's going from 25% to 35%, is one thing, and it depends on the lot size. But lot coverage, if you're going from 85% to 95%, where you would have had a little green area, now you almost have no green area, that change may be a bigger deviation in context. So I think it depends on even 10%, depending on which lot we're talking about, or side setback, could be more significant than we think. So I think as we go through the building types, it would be useful to understand the implications. Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm-
Thanks, Bonnie.
Granted, but this is not, these are the maximums that the planning board is allowed to review, period. It is not a threshold where they have to say yes.
Well, I think we still need maybe percentage as opposed to, feet because some of the lots are very small, and it's going to be hard to really understand the impact until we know what the lot sizes are and the coverage.
I only see D and I that actually mention 2 feet. Everything else is a percentage if I'm looking at the right.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, it's more the side yard setback that we're looking at right now because of the example that was brought up.
So I guess you could add in excess of 2 feet or a percentage. And like I think we're also saying is, this is just setting a course as to who you speak to, right? To pursue a waiver. It's certainly not a requirement to grant it.
Right. I think we should put a pin in this to a certain extent. We can
Right.
let the lawyers do the secret handshake and figure out how to tailor the language based on what we're saying. But
I'm good
on a
with that.
larger, on a sort of more broad view, are we okay with this idea? I'm okay with this theory, but that's just me.
I need a little bit more information on the lot sizes and, coverage, how close the houses are going to be.
Right.
Well,
I think
if I'm,
maybe look
if
at
I'm
it.
understanding the theory, as Jay is saying, it's the town board is making the big global decisions, building uses, building heights, and then the planning board is given some discretion on these items only with very minimal changes being requested. So if that's the theory, I'm good with the theory.
I'm
Right,
good
I
as
think-
well.
I think you can revisit the numbers after you understand the theory and the thought with the waiver, but then consider it relative to when you see what the actual standards are. And maybe you don't want the waiver, let's say for the smallest lot, but all the others are okay. But that's something you can look at once you have that in context with the lots and their dimensions.
Right. I'm saying I just need more information.
Yeah,
I just want to go through a couple of these changes here. This B, which was going to become A grant of the waiver, will not cause. It was going to be an adverse impact. It says a significant adverse impact. I don't know if that was changed just to kind of relate to seeker in general. In the seeker regulations, when you consider impacts and what might trigger, for instance, an environmental impact statement, the language refers to significant adverse impacts. So was that the thinking in terms of adding the word significant?
That's exactly it, Bonnie.
Okay. And Larry, do you have any thoughts on that from a legal perspective?
Again, I mean, it was, the context of this was looking at individual properties as that were requesting waivers, individual lots or mostly. And we wanted to make sure that there were, we didn't have the word significant in there because it wasn't intended as a seeker standard. It was intended as a standard that, for example, you don't create an offsite drainage issue for your neighbor by the grant of this waiver, or something like that. That was the intent of it. And
We could take significant out if that makes everyone feel more comfortable.
yeah, if you could live with that, I would remove that.
Let's move on. It's out.
Yeah.
Okay. D, grant of the waiver is consistent with, and it used to say the preliminary plan and special permit. This says grant of the waiver is consistent with the design intent of the preliminary plan and special permit. What was the thinking there? I think when you apply it, especially to the special permit, that is a bigger, potential.
Again,
concept of a
Bonnie,
waiver,
go
yeah.
back to the original language. Let's keep going.
Okay.
Bonnie, if we're taking that out, can we go back to the first sentence in 133? Not sure why.
Site plans.
Well, no, that's fine, but
Okay.
to the design standards as opposed to the smart code, I just, I'd like an explanation why that was changed.
I thought the design standards are more encompassing. It includes the architectural, includes the landscape, and includes everything.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we'll just confirm that because I think it's actually the special use permit which outlines what all is part of and which is the most encompassing. So we just need to make that consistent.
Yeah, but yeah, that's fine.
I believe they're right. I believe they're right. It's the design standards, but that's something we can confirm so we can move on from that.
Okay, so we did 1.3.4. So general, all facades shall be glazed with clear glass no less than, it was 30%, it's now 20% of the first story on rear loaded product only. I'm guessing that because a lot of the home types are now proposed to be front loaded garages.
Yes, that's exactly it. When you have the garage in the front, you minimize the opportunity for the glass.
So did you sort of analyze the products that you might be introducing and check whether 20 or 30% made sense?
We have, yes, we've done this exercise because this is not the first time this topic's come up, and we can live at the 20% with regard to the rear loaded homes where the garage is in the back. So then you have a higher opportunity for glass in the front.
So it depends on whether it's the garages or the front and the back. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's exactly where this is going, because the only homes where we are currently proposing the garages in the rear are rear stacked townhomes, but we might eventually come up with a traditional townhome with the garages in the rear. So that's why we put rear loaded product only. Maybe the better way to say that is a home where the garage is not facing the front street. Maybe just the vernacular isn't as clear as it could be.
I'm just trying to see. So it was all facades should be glazed with clear glass no less than 30% of the first story. Okay. On yours is on rear loaded products only.
Yeah, we
Just
did
wanna
not want to eliminate the concept. We just wanted to focus it where it would work.
I think what happens though is that by revising this sentence, what ends up going missing is what happens on those that are not rear loaded, because then it's 30%. So in changing this and focusing it on the rear loaded product, we eliminate the standard for what would have been on all the other building types, which is 30%. You follow?
No, that is correct. So now your first floor of a classic home with the garage in the front would not have a glass requirement.
There's no glass requirement on a.
I'm not saying we're going to, yes, please, of course, I'm not saying that we're going to build a home with a first floor.
No, I'm
where
just
there's no
trying to
glass.
understand.
Yeah, yes, and you're right. Your question is exactly on point, that the net result of this is that we are not creating a glass requirement for homes where the garage is in the front of the home.
Yeah, I think so. This is my thought. I think this might be worded so that it says all facades should be glazed with clear glass no less than 30% of the first story, except that in the instance of rear loaded dwellings, the glazing can be reduced to 20%.
I don't think that works.
That's exactly the opposite. The issue is if you've got a giant garage door in the front of the house, you're not getting 20% glass there.
Or if you, yes, that is exactly the bottom line. So, right, we're trying to avoid what you said, Bonnie.
Yeah, I'm trying to, so my brain is focused more on what happens with the rest of the dwelling units that are not rear loaded. Like, so in this instance, it was 30%. Why are we changing it to 20% if it's
And
rear loaded?
and making it only applicable to a rear entry garage. Why are we doing that? Because that's the only instance where we will meet that criteria. When we have a garage in the front of the home, which will be the majority of the homes, we won't be able to meet that criteria.
Could you meet 30% with a rear loaded
Right, that's what I'm,
garage, a rear loaded house?
Mitch, if I may assist you on this one.
Of course.
Hi, everyone. Lisa Higgins. The reason that we wanted to reduce that is because with the definition of facades in the smart code, it's specific to any exterior wall of a building that is set in a frontage line. Where we run into complications with that 30%, even on the rear load, is the side view, where if we create too many open areas with windows, we're impeding on the quality of the interior living space.
this might be, it might be beneficial to show us, to provide some kind of rendering of what you're trying to achieve.
Yes, we can
Because
certainly
again, I think we understand that if you're going to have now, whereas the product and where the intent in the smart code, and this is a general design concept, that the town didn't want to see a lot of front-loaded garages, especially front-loaded garages that are pushed in front of the main facade. That concept was not what these set of design standards were embracing. Now we're looking at different housing products. So if you have the garages that are front loaded, so now you have more space in the front facade that is, if you will, blank facade with no windows because of the garages, you need to reduce it to 20%. I guess that's what I was understanding. There's the justification for going to the 20%. What this is doing is actually saying, even when we have the garages in the back, we still need a reduction. And so I think what we need to see is an explanation, Lisa, or a rendering of how what that looks like. And is it because of single family product? Is it the townhouse product? Is it a particular product where that's creating the issue?
It's both, but it's certainly the townhome, because the townhome, of course, is a thinner style home, not as wide as a single family, but you still have a garage. But we can do exactly what you said, Bonnie, and what it sounds like what the board is thinking. We can come up with a couple of renderings that have the glass factored in as a percentage, so we can demonstrate what we're thinking about, and then perhaps with your guidance, come up with a way to create some other standards that are easier to follow for our sake and for the town's sake.
Right. What I'm thinking is that there's two places where these could land. We have our specific guidelines for each of the types, the multifamily, the village, et cetera. Some of these standards may be better embedded in those as opposed to here. And I think that might be the question, where to put this variation.
Yeah, I think you're actually sort of hit on an issue, Bonnie. These standards were crafted for a development that was predominantly single family houses.
Absolutely.
And now we got a whole bunch of different, a greater variation. So, and what I'm hearing, the reason that was driving this was an issue with whether something's on a front yard or a side yard. If you got a corner lot, you've got two front yards, and all of a sudden that starts to cause trouble. So maybe what we need is to, change this to basically say something like, go see table 3 for what the glass requirements are. And give
Yeah,
us as
and-
much glass as works on everything, and then we'll know what we can, what it is.
Right. I mean, this is almost an iterative process because I know we're still getting a sense of the product types and you're giving us more information on what these product types are. So as we get more information on what they look like, then it's also, you know, the changes are more understandable or comprehensible. So,
I have a very
and-
basic question.
Yep.
Does glass in the garage door make a difference in this calculation?
Not enough.
Okay.
It doesn't move the needle enough to leave this as is. We absolutely looked at that, Ken. No doubt about it. We love the idea, but we couldn't make that work.
And just for everyone's benefit, when Larry and I were having a discussion about the guidelines, you know, a question was raised: at what point in time, and what mix of how proposed product does it really change the smart code regulations and the design standard regulations? Because we're, as really, I think Jay pointed out, we really changed the housing mix here. And so if we have very few single family versus many townhomes, this guide was really, and the design standards were geared towards single family homes. And so, you know, we're making all these changes to standards to a product that might be minimal compared to the other product. And we need to make sure we focus on the product that is going to be, you know, the majority of the housing in that project, and make sure the standards are there. Because once this gets approved, like I said, this is a mini zoning code. It's establishing the regulations for Tuxedo Farm specific. And when you do come in for a townhouse development, you know, what's going to be the maximum building length? You know, are you going to have breaks in the facade? You know, again, glazing, or, you know, where buildings front loaded, rear loaded. It really needs to focus on the product that is the majority of what this project's going to be about, you know, to the extent, you know, whatever the town board approves. So that was kind of a general thought that came up as we went through these proposed revisions.
And that was exactly where we were, Bonnie, when we looked at this. We said, wait a second, this wasn't written for the diversity of homes that we are planning. So it took a little, we had to roll up our sleeves and figure out how can we tweak this so that we meet exactly what you said, to propose the bare minimum changes to make it work. So that it was the absolute theme. You just hit the nail on the head.
Right.
Well, and the other extension of that is, you know, I hear mentioned many times that the board made these decisions. Well, that was a board from many years ago, and most, if not all, of the members of this board were not a part of that. So, you know, we're trying to deal with documents from a different project and a different town board, and you know, we're going to work through it. But that needs to be understood. Even when the comments are the board decided this, you know, got to remember it's not this
Sure.
board.
Right. This is the
But I think
approval
we can move
document.
on from 252, I hope.
Right. I think we have a sense of it, and I think we have a sense of the mission of making sure that these standards are in the right locations. If it better served by something else, you know, we can move them or address it somewhere else. So
Yeah, no, I hear the attitude from everybody is, you know, we're just trying to get it right. And, you know, Jay made a suggestion about referring to a table so that it can be very specific, to eliminate vagueness down the road. And that's certainly the goal.
So under 261 parking location general, it reads parking areas and parking lots shall be masked from the frontage, meaning the street, by a building or street screen. So the idea was you didn't want to see parking areas or parking lots. This has parking areas and parking lots for commercial uses shall be masked from the frontage by a building or street screen. Pervious paving are preferred for parking lots behind commercial buildings. So this is changing the standard which applied to all development in the project to one that applies only to the commercial uses. And so what do you anticipate that if you have, let's say, a multifamily multifamily building or cluster of buildings, is the proposal to put parking in the front of those buildings? Or what is anticipated for the parking if residential isn't included?
Well, so Bonnie, let me start with a slightly different answer. The first thought was a garage driveway is a parking area. And we didn't want to be burdened with trying to figure out how to mask that from the street. So that was where we started. So we said, well, this must be something that should apply to commercial. And then that's how we started our internal thinking process here. Taking it to the next level of where you are, which is a multi-family parking lot. I don't think we have a problem masking, hiding, screening a multifamily parking lot. Our focus here was this could be interpreted to mean the driveway for a classic single family home
Or the townhouses?
or a townhouse, of course.
Okay.
You just add that wording, not, in parentheses, not to include driveways for single family homes.
We could, and again, it was a matter of style. How do we minimize changes on this? But sure, there's probably several ways to fine tune this.
Well, so the B says all parking areas, parking lots and garages shall be located at the third layer. So in general, the intent was that the parking was going to be in the back of the dwelling. They were going to be side loaded for the most part, except for situations where they had to be front loaded and then they had to be also masked. So the standards were definitely written for housing product and layouts where the garages are side loaded and the visibility of them minimized to the maximum extent. And so these changes here, if it's to have the front loaded garages, which was not intended, except in certain circumstances, then that design change we have to make sure is clear, but that, as you said, for multifamily, you could screen them or mask them. So we should be clear on that housing product and what we're trying to achieve. And so it sounds like it's the front loaded garages situation.
Correct. That's where we were finding 261 to be incompatible with the front loaded garage. So we were trying to minimize our adjustments to get us there. And we have the benefit, and you might be thinking this already, we had the benefit of stressing over this for several days and weeks. You have the benefit of this moment of looking at it. So, that's why it's helpful to have this conversation.
Any other thoughts, board members, on the parking location
Well,
discussion?
this is Michelle. I guess it's just kind of bringing up things that we'll talk about at another time, but the design guidelines for all the styles I'm looking at, none of them have front-loaded garages.
Right.
So I guess what we need to know is, are these design guidelines going to be followed, or are we looking completely new design guidelines and we need to wait to get those? Because, I've been reviewing the design guideline changes that were sent to us, but none of those, I'm just wondering if they're going to be applicable at all. Are they relevant, or should we just wait for design guidelines based on new styles that are being contemplated?
Well, I think, Michelle, this is Larry. I think the approach has been to see if there was the ability to change the existing documents in a way that achieved and accommodated the different the difference. That, and the reason that was the path was because everyone viewed that as the most expeditious path, as opposed to reinventing a new, document here. So I expect that we will continue to go down that road that we've already started going down, and working on further language changes based on this conversation tonight. Take another look at this and see if there's if it jumps out as serving the intent and guidance that it needs to. I don't think it's contemplated at this point that there's going to be a new document or a new set of design guidelines drafted.
Larry,
If
may I
that's what
respond to that?
Yes.
Thank you. There was nothing specifically called out within the architectural guidelines that prohibited the use of a front load garage, which is why we felt addressing it in the smart code would allow us that flexibility to continue to meet the intent of the current design styles while making this adjustment to the front load garages.
Okay, but I was addressing a broader issue in my comment, not that might be part of, but the point is that we want to try and see if, through what Bonnie's referred to as this iterative process, we can tweak these so that they are in a good enough shape to serve as the design standards for the project, rather than having to kind of jettison this document and start with a new document. That's what I'm
I
basically.
think that's reasonable, Larry, but I think Michelle's point is none of the design guideline houses, none of the product types have got a front load garage. And in fact, all talk about side load garages and things like that. So it raises the question of whether there's going to be some, why is a front load garage important? So obviously there must be a product that's got a front load garage, or we wouldn't be having this conversation. What's it look like? Did I get that right,
Okay.
Michelle?
You got it.
Okay,
did.
but I presume that's something that can be addressed as and incorporated into this document. But correct me if I'm wrong, somebody, if that's not the case.
It certainly can.
Yeah, okay.
But again, this comes down to we're trying to understand the requested changes. And so, okay, for example, the reason why commercial got put into 261 was this idea of, front driveways not needing screening. That makes sense. But now we're all wondering what it's going to look like. So I'm not saying no. I can't speak to anybody else, of course, but I'm waiting for the other shoe, as they say.
Well, so Jay, this, if you don't mind, that we did show you the other shoe, to use your phrase, at the last meeting, and all of those homes, but for the rear stacked townhome garage, were front entry garages. But maybe there's the broader question of, we're trying to make adjustments to this smart code, which was designed in a different time and for a different community. Would the board prefer us to take the leap and propose another set of smart code standards that would be more in line with the diversity of homes for the planned community?
Deirdre, my question would be, is that wouldn't there be specific standards based on the product type and the neighborhood that you're speaking to? These are so general that it doesn't really reflect the diversity of the community. So wouldn't you change the code or write the code to be specific to the product type and the neighborhood that it's representing.
And we could absolutely do that, and that is a tact we take in many towns where we have a piece of property and the town has a vision for a development, and we work together to come up with something that'll work for that property, but have a little flexibility built into it. No doubt we could go that way. We had started a different path to try to minimize changes, as you can see, and still achieve the development goal that we're trying to get to. But
And I think that was the question, Mitch, because if, let's say 90% of your housing product is front loaded, then there's a lot of time and there's a lot of narrative talking about where parking should go, that it's supposed to be in the third layer or the second layer, and it's setback and it's screened, etc. If this board is going to find that front loaded townhouses, that if they are the majority, or front loaded houses, regardless of housing type, are the majority, and that's acceptable, then it seems like there's a lot of verbiage spent regulating something that might be 10% of all housing units.
100%, Bonnie. No, you all have just focused in on exactly the hurdle we were facing trying to make these adjustments, which we can see based on your questions that in the abstract, it's hard to understand what we're doing. We looked at it from that bigger picture and struggled to get to where we are today. But if this isn't obvious and you're not seeing it, to tell you the truth, then maybe we do have to put another plan in place that is more directed to this community. And I'm not looking to take on more work for you or us or slow us down, but if that's the right path, we should take your direction.
Well, I'm sure like a lot of what you've already worked on and we're reviewing and getting up to speed with code and that was written before I was a town supervisor. A lot of the intent that's here, I'm sure we're trying to preserve, but I mean, this is a major one about garages. And so I don't think we need to throw it all out, but it does seem kind of pointless to try to bang the square peg in a round hole. Doesn't seem necessary.
Yeah, I think this smart code was written for a particular project, product, and concept. And again, this is a board and an applicant developer question. Does this really work? And
Yeah, so what are we asking the applicant to do here? So to cut to the chase.
yeah.
Revise, give us a different smart code base without trying to tweak the existing one based on what the applicant is actually going to do out there, or because if that's the case, there's no sense in further review of these changes, probably.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think we have to, give the applicant some direction here on, as this issue has now come to the surface.
So
Well,
I would ask,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead, Michelle.
No, go ahead. I was waiting for you to say something, but go ahead.
Okay. Hopefully I'm saying the thing that you were hoping I was going to say. I think to follow up with that, I think the larger question is, are we talking about there are some chunks of this that need to be redone? Like, obviously, this thing about garages doesn't work as currently written and adjusted. But is it worth going through the rest of it and seeing where we already are mostly in agreement? Because I think that the original premise that we're trying to change things as little as possible for efficiency of everybody's time and to the dismay of the consultants is still a good one.
That was kind of my point as well. I don't think So we've identified the garage issue as one that needs some correcting based on the product type, which I think to Michelle's point, we have these 8 styles, and that and these illustrations that are in the design guidelines that I don't think really reflect what is being proposed, and I personally feel it does need to change, and the product types, and but we're trying to, if you're looking at the illustrations and the styles that are in the design code that we were prepared to discuss tonight, it's obvious those there's going to be differences there, and the garages is one salient feature over.
I think there are also several other features, since, I guess we just need to know what is being contemplated as the design, because all the design standards are based on what we consider Hudson Valley style. And, we talked about in other previous meetings, we were all talking about maintaining that Hudson Valley sensitivity and style. But if that's not what is going to happen, then we need to see what is being proposed.
I think it's certainly possible to maintain a sensitivity to the Hudson Valley style, but we're not creating Tuxedo Park South here. We are creating a different entity.
My question to Bonnie is that, I think you have one of the best senses of how much this document remains relevant to the project changes, and whether it's kind of we should be getting a revised document, or this is just a matter of a couple of items in this document that can be reworked. And I think the board needs to, have a understanding of that, so it can help make a decision to direct the applicant.
And Larry, and that's fine. And we are certainly amenable to going through it as we have proposed it, with the changes in various elements, or as has been suggested, taking a swing at another version of the smart code that would be tailored to the community, but of course trying to keep intact as much of these provisions as we could that might still relate to that diversity of home styles that we talked about last time. No problem. We're happy to do that, and maybe have a work session with Bonnie to go through that before it gets back to the board.
Yeah, we're just trying to get to the point where we give you direction on that. And so what I think we were hearing is that, well, maybe it's just a few sections of this document that need overhauling, and the rest of the document might be, okay, it's tweaked, or are the issues more pervasive throughout the document, and then we send you on your, that we should send you on your way and say, look, take another swing at a revised smart code document here.
And Larry, I think before we take that other swing, let us look at it the former way and see if just adding some sections, particularly the townhomes, might be a way to do it most efficiently without completely overhauling the code.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
there may be references, the concept of the transect, the layers, all that. It just may be a lot of, again, design guidance, standards, etc., that really is not going to have much of an effect or really regulate this project. given the different code, the different product. Jay, I would say that this was almost intended to be a little Tuxedo Park South. It was supposed to have a certain design and aesthetic, but smaller buildings, smaller houses. But when Glenn Betramile from Related proposed the project, and it was taken over by Andrew, they had a concept of a particular quality development.
Understood.
Yeah. So,
Uh,
and
and
I'm not saying, and so it's not good, bad, etc. It was actually, I think, Andrew that had hired, either Andrew or Glenn had hired Robert A.M. Stern to come in and design and put together some of these standards. So there was this architectural aspect to the overall project, because at that time there was a desire to compete and want to be at the high end of price points and have a certain product and have custom builders. So the concept was different back then.
that's exactly correct. I'm not saying
Right.
there's anything wrong with this document.
Yep. It was a
And
different concept.
It was a different project.
Yep.
And the reason that we're going through all of this is because this is the playbook for a different project, which we're trying to hammer into working with the new project, and we're starting to run into some problems with that hammering. And so,
And ultimately this has to be used by the planning board. And so if we have interpretation issues and then we hand this off to the planning board, they're going to have difficulties as well. So, I think in the best of all worlds, let's see what can be salvaged here and maybe streamlined and can be used by the planning board, because this is a 10-year project. They're going to be working with this code for a while, and it really has to match what this project is now, as you say.
And to build on that, there's another, obviously, we sent in also a letter regarding revisions we would like to see to the landscaping, for example, that if we were revising or redrafting, I'll just say that, if we're redrafting the smart code, I would suggest that we would then put in landscaping code requirements at the same time, so that we and the planning board and all of the applicable consultants are looking at this one document that will be the game plan for the community on all levels, as opposed to who wrote this, who shoehorned this in, and what were they thinking? Because no matter how many times we add in all that narrative, I still think we might leave an opening there. And again, we're happy to work with the board in any respect, whether it's staying with the current plan or coming up with a plan that better suits the community. And we're also ready to do the hard work and get that draft over to you.
Okay. Do you want me to continue to scroll through some of these to get a sense of the changes?
Yes, I would like that.
Okay, so we were talking about the commercial uses, commercial buildings, and the applicant will further refine this to take into consideration multifamily and what can be screened. And again, I think this relates to the front-loaded garages and having to, acknowledge them. Exceptions on front-loaded uphill lots, garages must be set back 4 feet from the primary facade unless garage doors are architecturally enhanced. I think we need to probably have a picture or some sense of what architecturally enhanced means. There are doors and there are doors. And so, what that level is of what is architectural enhanced, it may be useful to see that in a picture. There are some pictures in the design guidelines of garage doors, and what I may think is architecturally enhanced may be different than what someone on the planning board thinks is architecturally enhanced. So images really are beneficial to help explain the standard.
And as you can see, the first thing we were trying to get away from was the obligation to set the garage 4 feet back. So we were trying to come up with, instead of crossing that out, coming up with some method to avoid it by presenting a garage door with some enhancements. But you're right, Bonnie. We don't have details for you as to what that means.
Yeah, so these are in the design guidelines, and just to this point. We have a variety of garage doors shown, here, this type of garage, it says encouraged. These are all examples, encouraged, not permitted. And these are more the typical, panel doors, raised panel, the vinyl. And we don't want, if this is what's proposed and someone thinks this is architecturally enhanced, we need to know that versus this, because this is what the expectation is right now. So again, pictures will really help define that.
Bonnie, also in those pictures, I'm glad you brought that up, because when they're asking, when the change is to allow a 16-foot wide door, isn't that what's not permitted? The 16 foot, I don't know what
Right.
it is of
Right
those
now.
doors, but it needs to have, framing, I guess, if that's the right word. So it would be 2 single doors.
Right. That was the intent of the design guidelines, was to not have large 16-foot single doors.
So is that
Especially
acceptable
because-
to the applicant or not? Because it seems they want to be allowed to have that.
I think it comes back to the much bigger question of what are the product types that they're proposing?
Yeah.
I didn't write this code. I didn't agree to these 8 styles. So I just want to be clear when we say we agreed to all this, that was the previous board. And, but I do agree that, we need to see what is being proposed. And because, we're trying to fit a suit of clothes, from a dead man, as far as I'm concerned. There's a new person here. And, we got to respond to that. And because I'm looking at these 8 styles, and this is not what I think the new project is going to look like. As Jay said, and this was, and Abani said, this was definitely designed from a stepson of Tuxedo Park. And, that's not what I'm envisioning for this future development. I'll be clear about that. I see words in here about New York society and Gilded Age and posts of rusted logs. I don't see that. So I think we need to be looking at what the products are being proposed. And I think we'd be going through this a lot faster rather than, as I said, trying to drive a square peg in a round hole. Somebody else used some other analogies, but I still do think there's a lot of what we would hope would be in here as design guidelines that would fit a new project as well. So I'll leave it to the experts as to, okay, you read this. We are trying to respect the work that previous boards had done, but I also want to be clear that I don't want to be quoted as being in agreement with these designs that came out decades ago that might no longer be relevant.
I think to some extent, again, when we do planning, sometimes we do these visual preference surveys, and you take a look at a series of images of different townhouse styles, different house styles, and in this case, the applicant, the developer, would say, okay, here are the different models that we envision here. Here are samples of what we've done, and this is what we envision, and then craft the design standards around that. I'm really starting to think that might be the better approach, because I'm looking at, for example, and again, it could still take a lot from what's already been crafted, but I've been on the Lennar site and trying to look at some housing. Obviously, what you're proposing here, I'm not entirely sure, but this was just your site in general. And so I was looking at this house down in here, the next gen home that's on the Lennar site. And here is your door, that we've been talking about, a 16-foot door that has the windows, that has, the panels. This treatment up here, is that intended now to be sort of the Adirondack style, or is that some sort of more modern, Victorian? is it maybe a better approach to say, here's an example of something that could occur here? And if the board says, yeah, we could see this here, then to say, okay, let's make sure the design guidelines have been crafted and incorporate what we're trying to achieve. If this is 10%, if this is 20% front glazing, whatever that number is, this is what we're maybe proposing for a home. And then do the same for the townhouses and do the same for the multifamily, for their product. Because again, these guidelines are designed for a different product and a different developer, really. And maybe there might have not even been a developer contemplated at that time, but now you do have a developer. And how does this fit? And Mitch, I don't mean to put you on the spot with saying this is a house. These are just samples from your page, but it becomes examples for me of how something might look.
And of course, Bonnie, I have to agree with everything you said, with one exception. This is from a Lennar web page,
Yep.
but Lennar is a national home builder, as we talked about at the beginning, covering 20 some odd states. So this may be Arizona.
Right.
I don't want to promise you what's in Hawaii, Arizona, or Las Vegas, or California, or Florida.
No cacti?
Is there any cactus in this?
No, I don't think there is.
I was looking for palm trees, to tell you the truth, when you first put it up, but there's a deciduous tree, so it's probably not Florida. So if you would stay on our New Jersey webpage, which, but listen, you go to whatever webpage you want. We're very proud of all of our homes. Now I'm curious where you are, so I'm looking, but I can't figure it out. It doesn't matter. So the bottom line is,
I did a similar thing and searched Lennar websites just to try to get visuals, and you pointed out to me that exact fact that I was looking at homes anywhere. I actually tried to pick states where
here we go.
similar landscape as the Northeast, North Carolina, things like that. But yeah, I think it makes a lot more sense to be working from products that are in your portfolio.
Yeah, perfect. And I'd be,
as I said to you, that I want to come and take a tour of products that are in the New Jersey portfolio.
and I'd love to do that. So where we can go, and we can go in a lot of different directions, but trying to get a flavor for where the board it seems to be leading us, is we could have one session, so to speak, where we give you a deep dive into our homes. We've given you a couple of introductions into them, but we can go a little deeper and a little bit more clearly. And then if that all works, then Lennar would be happy to take the first cut at a revised or new smart code, so to speak, that would effectuate the design standards to make those homes happen in the Tuxedo Farm community. And we would certainly promise that to the maximum extent, if there are sections of the current smart code that easily roll over, copy and paste, so that there'd be some continuity. So that'd be fine. And Ken, love to give you the royal tour. No problem.
I already bought my ticket, so I'm coming.
We're not charging you
I think
anything.
that's a fine idea, but I also think that I'm certainly willing to be flexible, and I think that we're trying to come up with a process that works. We still like the, Hudson Valley style part
The
of it.
style base.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
that we want to keep that. We don't necessarily need, it's not, like I said before, it's not colonial Williamsburg. We're not doing historic recreation here, but we want it to look like our town.
So Jay,
Like somebody airlifted somebody else's town and dropped it in the southern part of our town.
But I don't know. Is there really a unique look to our town? I mean, I'm in Laurel Ridge. Every home is different. So I don't know. I want to see something coordinated for sure. When people talk about Hudson Valley or New England, I'd kind of go, in which decade are we talking about? So I guess what seems most truly to me is Lennar builds products. We're talking about the New Jersey team. I don't think, I think we need to understand what it is they build and how that can be put together in a cohesive way that gives Tuxedo a sense of cohesive style, that it's not just a hodgepodge. And that's what you would expect to get with somebody who's building a whole project of this size. So, and there's certainly elements of style that would be possibly Adirondack or Greek revival or shingle style or etc. But I don't think we're trying for. I think you were saying, Jay, historic recreations or anything like that.
Yeah, I just brought up the Woodlands. I wanted to remind everybody, Woodlands is our other PID. And Tuxedo Farms isn't the only PID that the town has had. Woodlands is a 200 unit plan integrated development. It was started by, forget the developer, and then it was built out by, I believe, K. Hovnanian. And it's 37, I think, single family homes or so, and then the remainder of the townhouses. And so, this has, this is what this particular townhouse development looks like. And, there are architectural features to this design, but the streetscape is different. You don't see sidewalks. It's in a more rural area of the town. And that was that design concept. And so then you have the Tuxedo Farms design concept, but I think that Lennar is somewhere in between, not this at Woodlands, but no longer the Tuxedo Farms of yesterday. So I think we're somewhere in the middle. And I don't know, if you were to, I think ultimately if your product is different and townhouses, and I'm not saying it's this, but it's different, it has to, the design standards have to reflect that. And if the town board feels that, but it still has to stay within the context of the Hudson Valley, because you don't want to put, a particular housing type that's not something born from the Hudson Valley.
Well, I gotta say, my house wouldn't be approved by those standards. So I guess I gotta demolish my house. That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, we do have, the town has had an ARB for a long time. The ARB was born out of the need to review the design of the Tuxedo Reserve PID. And all of the subdivisions, interestingly, in the town are regulated. And one of the things that we talked about was, well, if I live in Tuxedo, down by the Woodlands, one of the subdivisions down there. If I live down there and there's no precedent, if you go into Newport, Rhode Island, if you go into particular communities, there's precedent, there's historic buildings. If you actually went into parts of the hamlet itself with our little house buildings that have kind of the Dutch gambrel roof in places, if you stuck a different house there, you would notice it because there's context. Here in the town, when they create their architectural design guidelines, when you apply them to some of the subdivisions, for instance, down in Eagle Valley, there really is no context. It was just to make sure that there was a particular quality of development that would happen. That's why there was an ARB. But also the ARB was really to ensure that there was some architectural review and minimum standards for Tuxedo Reserve, because that's what had been promised at the time.
But,
so we do have an ARB, and they're going to be guided. It happens to be the planning board now. So they're guided by these standards as well in the design of the project.
but let's take a step back. I think the project has an original concept and an original design motif.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We have realized that the project has changed. I think, everyone has accepted that and needs to, because otherwise we're wasting everybody's time. And those changes to the project, the housing mix, the all of the above mean that a number of these design standards, which are based on single-family homes on relatively large lots, don't work. And we acknowledge that and are willing to accept, I certainly am, modifications so that the whole development will work and be successful. That doesn't mean that we're throwing everything out and it's okay to build me a whole bunch of apartment buildings like down in Sloatsburg or up in Monroe. So we still want it to look like this general design concept. But now take that as the basis and make the adjustments so that we can make the project work. Would be my marching orders. I'm one of 5, obviously.
I agree with
that. I
agree
basically
with
would like to see the neighborhoods and what the look is and make sure that it's a cohesive community. And then we can, it's basically, to me, an appendix to these design standards that are specific to the neighborhoods as they are developed. Because to Michelle's earlier point, the waivers on the side lawns or whatever they are is dependent on the neighborhood and the size of the lot, and that would be a neighborhood issue. So
the product type, of course.
Yeah, and the product type. So to me, some modifications that take into account the neighborhood and the product type would get us to where we need to be. That's my opinion, but.
But bottom line also, if you looked at Lennar's products and you said, oh God, now we couldn't live with that, then this would be pointless. And
well, I think that's a good point, Ken, because Jay just made, a comment about, well, if they were proposing, and I think you talked about the multifamily down by Salzburg, if that style and that type of housing collectively is not something that the town wants to see, it's good for Lennar to know that up front, because I don't know what the multifamily is going to look like necessarily. And so if that's a problem, then we need to discuss specifically what you don't want in addition to what you're fine with.
And Bonnie, on the applicant's behalf, we're with you 100%. We wouldn't want to go and draft and then we have a home that meets a standard but doesn't meet what the town wants. So I think it feels like it's a 2-step process. Step 1, we're sitting down, perhaps with you, perhaps with a couple of others, saying these are the homes. Does this work? And when we get to some level of yes, coming back to the board, when we get to the board's general yes, then we're doing the drafting to make it a reality for the community, and tailoring it to the single family homes will have certain standards. The townhomes will probably have a different standard, and so on and so forth, so that we're not shoehorning things in and not probably giving the planning board a headache down the line.
But even beyond that also is important to me, and I'm sure everybody talking about this project, is, the nexus, the center, where the highest density is, the commercial space, the town square, so to speak. That's going to set the tone for the rest of the project and builds out from there. So, that's another challenge. And I think when those designs are presented, I think a lot of this would flow a lot faster than probably this process.
I agree.
It also seems to me that, as we were looking through some of the homes on the Lennar website, that there are different styles for different parts of the country. So can Lennar present us what they would consider to be Hudson Valley style, or at least some homage to that, rather than something that, is in central New Jersey?
Wait, I live in central New Jersey, so.
I have a home there too, so
Okay.
I love it. But I'm just saying, it's a different style and
No, I'm with you 100%. And in that meeting that I'm talking about, part of our charge would be to see what kind of architectural enhancements that we could propose that could meet that idea. No, that makes sense. And I also think that whether it's Ken or Bonnie or right on target, that we couldn't be just showing you a couple of homes, a townhome and a single family home. We should show you the whole picture, meaning the commercial, the rental, the commons, so that we can show you that there is a design style here for the community. And I think that'll then create a layup almost for us to move ahead with the design standards.
I think so.
Yeah, I think it'll be easier. I would also say that if we're going to talk about look at buildings, look at styles, I really think I'm guessing that that's something the town board really wants to be involved with, because I think, you know, Tuxedo cares very much about its aesthetics and what it looks like, and that might be useful, again, almost like a visual preference survey, where you have a whole series of images of what Lennar could build here and allow the town board to say, that looks really good. That's like perfect, you know, or that one would be good if we did this change, to give you a sense of what's, you know, within the vision for Tuxedo.
But
And
there's
then once
also,
you have that,
you know, we talk about a number of neighborhoods. I've lost track of how many set across a 1,200 acre parcel. You know, so there is room for diversity.
variation.
Yeah, there's definitely room for variation. So,
Yep.
you know, there's Hudson Valley of 2020 and Hudson Valley of 1920. You know, so I don't envision it as all, you know, just a Disneyland. Everything looks the same, you know, or just tries to aspire to what a vision of Hudson Valley is. So
Yeah, there's
but
like
you
the
know,
modern.
but there's
like
a
the
builder that's come to the table that clearly has experience building. You know, they have a portfolio of what they build, and it would be, I don't know, I just can't imagine that we're not starting from that point. That what these guys are good at building, and tweaking it, you know, with stylistic preferences. But you know, you gotta. You know, if you're going to Toyota to buy a car, you got to kind of know what Toyota builds. You know, I can't ask for a Maserati. You know, it's a different car.
Well, and I think there might be design styles, and I may have seen it on the Lennar page. They're just styles that might not be encompassed within the existing regulations. So, you know, there's this whole modern farmhouse look now, a particular aesthetic that they're building in different areas, and some think that it's attractive. And if there's elements of that style that make sense for Tuxedo Farms, and there is some basis in, you know, Hudson Valley architecture for it, the farmhouse style, but you know, you can add to them, and you could take, if Adirondack really isn't what Lennar wants to build, then, you know, if some of these don't make sense, then maybe take them out.
Well, a lot of it's got to be dependent on price points. I mean, you know, yeah, you could build a hell of a lot different house for $3 million than you can for $700,000 or $600,000. So, I mean, you know, when it comes to elements of style, it's got to fit an affordable budget for the regular people that I hope are going to move into this town. You know, people that are, you know, that $600,000 home is a lifetime investment. You know, and so, you know, that's got to be based on the reality of price points as well.
Let's touch upon a couple of items. So I think I'm hearing consensus that the group really wants to see more product to tailor design guidelines a little better to align it better to this housing product and this housing project. There are a couple of items, and we touched upon it last week. The building height, and it says 10 feet for roof, dormer, articulation. 4-story buildings are allowed, and the maximum height was to be 52 feet, and now it's proposed to be 63 feet. And I think in the past, the town board had made a request to the fire district, and I understand, and there was some discussion about there being sprinklers for these buildings. but the town in the past had referred these concepts and had the fire commissioners review any concerns they may have with that building height, to be able to access it with trucks, et cetera. So I don't know if the board wants to do that or if they have any reaction to going another 11 feet taller on some of the buildings. Perhaps the applicant could discuss how many buildings are we talking about, and is it really just the commons area where you would have these height of buildings? It'd probably be useful to talk a little about the extent to which, you know, you'd have these buildings in the project.
Well, let me address that. That's probably, we'll make it a short conversation. I think it's first of all, it's really to have a 20-foot ceiling for the retail, because the mixed-use building, and to have enough room for a proper sloped roof for proper architecture, frankly. That's it. That's the reason. And it really only is in right about a few buildings in the commons.
Okay.
So
Is
that's
it the
correct.
mixed use
Only
buildings?
Mixed-use
the
buildings,
mixed-use
yes.
buildings along Quail Road.
Okay. So I think there might be up to 4 of those buildings. It's not a lot, I don't
Yeah,
recall,
it's
from the concept plan.
yeah, less than a handful of buildings.
Just so the board understands. So this isn't a across the board changing of height, it's for the mixed use buildings.
That is correct.
Right.
Well, it's for that T52 zone only.
Only.
With the specifically for the retail to accommodate the 20-foot ceiling to floor height for the first floor.
Right, and plus 3 residential floors above and the articulation of the roof
Okay.
lines.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have examples of where that height has been built or a sample building, an image of that sample somewhere?
I think the building that is in the smart code reference is, I mean, I don't have something other than that pull up right now as a reference. But
It should be noted that actually we made very few changes, if any, other than height to the multifamily design standards. So
Yeah, and that would be an area where maybe instead of, again, if that transect is only limited to those buildings, then this is fine. If this transect includes other buildings, then we may want to be specific as to it's for these buildings, you know, for the mixed use buildings.
which we can do. I think if you look at I think it's page 31, SC 31, table 6J.
In the 2015 smart code?
I think it's 2017 smart code.
Oh, well,
I mean, they're the same. I
Yeah,
think
what
15 or
page is
17.
it?
I think it's the same.
31 you
It's-
said?
SC 31.
That's the 31.
Yeah, it's not exactly what we're talking about, but I think that building on the corner, if its top was not cut off, I think would be that example because it's got 3 stories above the retail or the commercial on the corner, and then one would assume that it's got a roof line that has some articulation to it, and it's not a flat roof because the image on table 6J, which has 4 stories in the section, show the flat roof, which we don't want. So the reason really is to allow adequate height to the commercial floor, including the structure, and 3 residential floors above, which again, like I said, is happening in very few buildings along Quail Road.
Yeah, I would say, I don't know that this image is showing 20 feet, although I've seen some new developments that have 20-foot high ceiling, I think like in Robinsonville in New Jersey.
I think the 20 feet is coming from, if you look at the language, maximum first floor height at retail is 20 feet floor to floor, maximum height at residential is 12 feet floor to floor. So when we came up with the 63 feet, we came up with 20 plus 333, which is 53 plus 10 feet. So we are not using the maximum residential story height of 12 feet, we are using 11. So it'll be a combination of, it will most likely not be, 20, maybe a little less than that. It really depends, but I think the total 63 feet would give us enough flexibility to allow for the right amount of, roof line articulation that we're looking for in that portion of the plan.
Okay. Yeah, I was just saying these are older buildings, so I think
Yeah,
this particular height isn't going to be 20. I was saying Robinsonville because once upon a time when the town board was reviewing standards, they went down there in New Jersey. And so this was some of the development that was happening. And I think that's where you start to get to the taller,
correct.
the pedestal, the bottom for the retail stores, and probably even taller than this.
Yes. And I think again, right, it's trying to have enough for the uses that we are going to be contemplating some of these, some live work type of space, or the maker space type of spaces, loft like, so to give that feel to the ground floor, plus put some density above that, again, in very few locations, allows us the flexibility to do that. And again, I think based on our Transect plan, it's really the T52 zone.
Is the board fine with that from the aesthetic perspective?
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
You showed Robinsonville, which had only flat roofs, so.
Right.
I was just trying to visualize how that would look with a pitched roof, but I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I was trying to find, there's another project outside of Poughkeepsie or in the town of Poughkeepsie that's brand new. And that's a planned community. And I think they might have those kind of building heights. So I was going to try and find that, but I'm not particularly successful right now. So, I think I had in my comments, I had addressed some of these proposed changes to some of the standards. But again, I don't know if it's a little premature to get into these changes if we're really going to start focusing more on the product and then work on the guidelines themselves rather than going into detail in some of these changes. I thought the building height was important though, because to me that is a change that the board has focused on before.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're trying to preserve as much of this as practical, but there's no point to getting into the fine details until we have the gross details finalized. And
Yes, there are certain, I agree. There are certain things that might, be the same, such as, discussion of the shutters being, workable, or at least look like they're operable, and that each shutter would be half the size of the window, that type of thing. That I think that there were proposed changes to that, but I would think no matter what the style is, we would want that to remain. Things, so there would be certain things in the guidelines that we would want to keep.
Well, and we need to hear that, because if there are lines in the sand, we need to know where they are so that we can either find a way to cross them together or we just stay apart on those topics.
I like the first notion, finding a way to work together.
Yeah. Thank you. Me too, Ken.
so, but then, all right, so that's fine. Now, are we going to then go through all the rest of these, sort of design concept modifications and talk about them, or what?
You want to switch to the architectural design guidelines and talk about some of the materiality changes, the vinyl, et cetera?
I mean, perhaps. What else do we have left in? I mean, we can.
Well, we did work on the tech memo, and then there were some pages that we gave back for other comment. I don't know if this is the appropriate time to hear some of that, but
Yeah, I would only say, so I'm just looking as I'm scanning, when we discuss LED, when we're adding LED to have a color, the Kelvin value there. Typically, we don't want to go higher than 2,700 to 3,000 because you don't want that very bright bluish white glare of LEDs. You want it to be a little bit softer in the environment and for the night sky. So if you're going to LEDs, I would specify also a standard for the maximum Kelvin value. And what's typically recommended is 2,700, 3,000, which gives you more of a warm light.
I'm good with that.
So,
So do you want me to switch to the architecturals?
well, I mean, is there anything else significant in here? I mean,
So there was, and maybe the applicant can explain it, multifamily. Usually in the definitions, we have, single family is a single family, two dwellings is a two family, a duplex, and then three families or three or more dwelling units in a building. And here the proposal is to change it to a building housing more than two families in separate units. And that's not standard, and it's probably not consistent with our actual zoning. So wanted to know why you wanted to go to two families or more in separate units for a multifamily.
What was happening is, and again, this is a perfect question because we have a specific intent, but it wasn't obvious, obviously, when you look at it. The problem was the stacked townhomes, which, remember, we looked at that at the last meeting because they're somewhat unique with separate doors, but on top of each other. The stacked townhomes were falling under the multifamily definition, which was creating all kinds of zoning problems and bulk standard problems. So how do we pull the stacked townhome out of the multifamily with that minor change you see in the definition of multifamily, as well as adding a new definition of a stacked townhome, is how we fixed that for our purposes of allowing that home to exist.
Okay.
So if you read the stacked townhome definition first, hopefully you'll find that to be acceptable, and then go back to multifamily was designed to make sure it didn't overlap with stacked townhomes.
Was it that there were restrictions on multifamily? Because on the one hand, it's two single family dwellings, but it's in a building of at least 4 dwelling units. So, it really is sort of a multifamily building, but it's a specific product that's called the stacked townhouse. Was it in those design guidelines that there were specific issues being created that you had to meet?
Correct. The multifamily, I think in its intent, was a condominium building or a rental building. And the stacked townhome wasn't falling under a townhome definition. It was landing in a multifamily definition. So we had to pull it out. And if you just look at the definition of multifamily without the blue lining, it's a building with more than one family in separate units in a stack configuration. It fell into that stacked townhome genre. So we needed to tweak that and then come up with the stack definition, which is a unique home type. And that's why we took a moment to explain it. And that's why that definition has a lot of words in it, because it takes us a little bit to explain it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think again, once we know the product, we can adjust definitions to match the product.
And if we didn't have the conversation last week where we introduced the stacked townhome, you would have no way to have a perspective of what this means at all.
Right.
Which goes back to the theme that we seem to be creating is we need to focus this on the top level and then drill down to the details, as opposed to where we are. We're dabbling in the top level, but jumping into the details, and it seems to be creating some consternation on the board's view of things.
I would say confusion.
I didn't. I started with that word, but switched to another one. You could tell. I don't.
All right, so these are the edits. And again, I think some of the housing products and the building types and what's allowed in each of the transects. This will adjust as we go through it. This is always a good summary table of what's allowed within each of the zoning districts. I call them zoning districts, they're transect zoning districts. And again, this isn't the full, you all have the full smart code. This isn't the full smart code that the applicant provided. This is the pages excerpted as far as what there was a desire to change. On this particular, I think I did note in my comments that the carriage, I didn't see any changes. So I didn't know if it just kind of got stuck in there by accident because I didn't see any red lines. And I bring it to your attention because I don't know if you did want a red line carriage and somehow it went missing or I don't see it.
Or it didn't apply, so we didn't feel the need to change it.
Okay.
I'd have to take a harder look to remember, but I think that might have been the issue.
Okay. All right, so let's get out of this. And let's quick go to,
Oh, we're not building that, whatever that is. We're not building
come on, that's Utah.
it. Come on.
That's the Utah division.
They use clapper.
That's a fixer-upper.
Yeah. For 650,000, you
And
get
the
that
minimum,
in Utah.
the minimum lot area is 1,000 acres. All right, I'm gonna pull this one up.
Every time my wife complains about something, I tell her that's where we're moving, right there. Okay. All of a sudden, everything looks wonderful.
Okay, shall we start here? I know, Michelle, you had some questions on some of the,
Well, some of it will obviously not be relevant if we're not using these styles.
right,
But there are certainly some general points that I think we need to maintain no matter what the styles. So for instance, in Adirondack style, I don't think, the white window frames fit, but, I think the rest of it's fine. And, what is the difference between a 2-panel and
solid.
solid? Is it just that there's trim in between the top and bottom?
Well, we can get into that if you like. I do have a demonstration picture of a home that talks about some of these things because we thought you might have a couple of questions, for example, of exactly that. What is a white panel? So if you'd like, I can pull that up and it'll cover a couple topics.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Sure.
All right.
Absolutely.
Okay. Oh, now I gotta figure out how to share. Always.
Oh, you'll be an expert.
The bottom?
You will be an expert.
Okay. Hang in there. Okay, so can everyone see this home outline in the blue frame?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. I'll stop while I'm ahead. So going right to the question, in the middle in red, it says 2-panel shutter. And I'm going to try to blow it up for my sake and your sake. Do you see how, can you, I hope you can see how, while this is a singular shutter, it has 2 architectural detail panels in it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that's, and by the way, just not hiding the ball at all here. So a couple other things that we'll go through and you might question. This is obviously at the bottom, a 16-foot wide garage door with some, yes, Bonnie, some architectural enhancements. And vinyls, and in the upper right-hand corner here, classic vinyl siding, as compared to in the middle of the home, adjacent to the shutters, is also vinyl siding, but in a shake scenario. So it gives it a different texture and a different look. And if you change the color, really, really can pop. And then we also talk about, as we'll see in a few minutes, synthetic stone. So this is a stone veneer. They're not really individual stones, but it's a synthetic stone look. So we figured you may have some of these questions, so that's why we jumped ahead with this picture.
While we're on this topic, because I think it's in the architectural standards as notes, the intent is to have all the sides of the building be designed that have architectural elements. And as I'm looking at this image, and I know this isn't why you were trying to show this image, but in this particular image on the left-hand side, if I look down that side facade, it looks like it's all vinyl. That it does the stone or other elements, like let's say it were a stone base, it doesn't wrap around, the materials don't. And so what is the design intent?
So our intention would be to wrap a design element around the side where it is a home that abuts another street. However, if the board wanted us to consider wrapping those design elements in other scenarios, we can certainly do that. We got concerned because the design standards seem to talk about wrapping those design elements around the entire home, and we weren't looking to do that. We weren't looking to wrap them around the back, but we could consider some elements moving around the side of some of the homes just to create differences in appearance, particularly if there's no windows on that side. That might be an opportunity for the enhancement you're thinking about, which is what you see right here in this example.
Yeah, because it's interesting. Well, with the townhouses, you're obviously going to have, lengths of building. And so you may have 8 units and then 2 sides, really, because you have both ends of the building. So would it be the same with the townhouses? Would you still, on the ends of the townhouse building, treat them in some way architecturally, or would, in some instances, the entrances possibly to a unit be from the side or side loaded,
Well, yes to everything you just said, to tell you the truth. In the townhome configuration or the stacked townhome, where, as you said, you have a run of homes, we would typically put some enhancement to run around the side of the building, whether there was a door there or not. But obviously, if there was a door and a side entrance, that would in and of itself create that enhancement. The other way that we can create the enhancements, so to speak, is, as you can see, the flower or shrub bed. And if we do get as far as to the landscape guidelines that we wanted to adjust, one of the things we wanted to adjust is taking the requirement to put all the landscaping in the back, which seemed to detract from the opportunity for a rear yard, and layer it so that it's partially in the back and partially in the front, so that we're creating a natural scape also as another way to enhance the home. So, and those are things we can either talk about tonight, or as we might seem to be trending, something we can just design into a revised design standard that we can look at in the context of our homes.
I think the like everything else, the landscape standards were especially focused and aimed toward the single family homes with a certain minimum amount of landscaping, again, to have a particular value and aesthetic from the beginning. Here, you're probably going to have, again, townhomes, the majority, and the landscaping, again, you're going to have a long building. So your landscaping opportunities are going to be in the front where you don't have driveways, the sides, and as you said, in the back, you're going to have some yard. And I don't know what might be HOA land versus, fee simple land. I don't know if they'll have a backyard, or if it's really, they're going to own a fee simple lot underneath the building, and then what surrounds it is essentially common area. And so the landscaping has to be keyed to this kind of different ownership. Again, so kind of harkening back to the Woodlands in Tuxedo, where this is more of a townhouse type development. And I don't know that you're going to have a lot of homeowner landscaping for townhouse units, versus single family.
No, you're spot on. In the town-owned community, we would start the community with shrubbery in the front and perhaps some limited places in the rear, but we have to look to the homeowner association to be maintaining that. We always have different ideas where the homeowner can enhance their shrub bed with flowers or things like that, but we try to let the homeowners organically and naturally come up with their own standards over time, rather than having Lennar enforce standards right up front that we think are the right standards, but they might want to change over time. But that again, Bonnie, that's another opportunity when we're sitting down or we're presenting something to you, if we're redrafting this, that we can get to that level of detail as to what will be the various landscaping requirements based on the different home styles. And that's a great way to think about it.
Yeah, I think when you look at the design standards, these ones, they talk about not trying to create what some have referred to as like a production set, where, you know, you have the facade on the front, but then everything else is just a box. So the design intent was to have articulation and materials, et cetera, around the building. You know, I would say the rear is probably the least important. You know, it's what you see from the street. That in particular is important, and the street, you'll see the sides as well. Okay,
and we're with you 100%, and we appreciate you bringing that to our attention. It wasn't the purpose of this slide, but
right.
It feels like the purpose of our conversation today is to get to issues that we're going to deal with a little bit later down the road, pretty soon, but down the road.
Yes.
Okay, all right, I'm going to stop sharing for now.
Is that a New Jersey Lennar home?
It sure is. You'll see it on the tour.
All right.
But if it's in Orlando, I'm not taking you to Orlando. Sorry.
Nah, that's okay.
Okay.
Could you bring samples of the synthetic stone to town hall so when we're there we can take a look?
I think the answer is yes. I'm going to look for Lisa to nod yes or no.
So Greg may or may not know this, but if you go to the northerly entrance of Tuxedo Farms, I think there still is, there was a little building constructed. And the whole purpose was to include materials that were proposed for the vinyl, and specifically to see the gauge, I guess, of the plastic, how, you know, that it was going to be a certain quality. And you know, I think the board would love to see the materials because it really gives them a sense of what the quality is. You know, again, pictures, samples, I think it all helps in understanding the product. So okay. I think a lot of the changes to the styles were about adding, you know, vinyl siding, synthetic stone. You know, I think some of the changes start to maybe get away from what the style is. So if we say opening set deep into exterior wall with trim, either flush or recessed or minimal trim, I'm not sure that that then is actually consistent with the style. You know, at some point, are you getting away from the style and making changes? And that's a general question.
I mean, a style like this, though, to me, would only work in the farm lots. I mean,
well, I'm going to show you something, Ken. So this is English, right? Oops, sorry. Get back to where we were. And I'm not sharing, right?
Not yet.
not yet.
Okay, so where did my WebEx go? Share. Share. Okay, sorry about that.
No worries.
Is this where we were? I have so many windows open here now.
That's my crime.
I think this is it. Yep, here we go. All right, so this is the English country style. And if you go to Ramapo Reserve in Oakland.
It popped up. Oh, there it is. Okay.
This is I think what they're trying, or what this is the aesthetic. I think this would be comparable to an English country style. You know, Cotswold look. But this image also shows you, why am I getting this? Okay, so you're looking at this image from Oakland?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. So this is what happened. So this is in Rampo Reserve. You can see the side
Of the
of the
house
homes.
next door, yeah.
Right. That there's, and I think what happened, these are smaller lots and they're very small yards. And when I say small yards, maybe it's 10 to 15 feet. And my recollection was in Oakland, and I don't know if it's a New Jersey standard because this is New Jersey, maybe Mitch and Lisa know. If you're within a certain distance, houses of each other, you know, new code that I guess you can't have windows, you have to have fireproof walls if there's close enough. So I think this is because of how close they are. They ended up, I think, having to put fireproof walls here. That's my recollection from a long time ago, which is why this looks the way it does. But this, so this, I think, you know, many would say, well, this is attractive, but it's only the front. And that's what they mean by the set design, where the front facade is designed and not the sides. And so that's where you get into, well, how much more do they need to design around the building to meet the intent or what the town would like to see. So I think if you ever get a chance to drive into Rampo Reserve, it's a big planned development. It has lots of different, and it's older development. I think it was Baker Companies that did that one. But it gives you examples of product and what it looks like. And it's a little aged at this point. So you'll get a sense of what a planned development looks like after a certain amount of years. And, you know, by going to places like this, you get ideas of what you do like and you're fine with and things that you might want to improve upon. But so this, I think this is an example of how you take a style in the style book and how you might apply it to a new house.
Yes,
That I
it's a
understand
modern
totally.
version. Bonnie, in that development, do they
Rampo
have
Reserve?
yeah, in Rampo Reserve, do they have what we had or what's currently in the smart code, I guess, is that no two houses next to each other or across the street from each other can be the same style?
I don't know. I don't have their design standards. They definitely have differing styles, and I think they were also built in neighborhoods. I'm not sure that it was all Baker. I think Baker started it, but maybe pieces of it might have been sold. I'd have to find out from Oakland. But again, I think it's just a good idea to drive around there and you get a sense of, again, different housing types, and it's local, it's close. So
Right,
it's something to view.
yeah, I know where it is, not too far. But I
It's
know
right
that
off of 202.
in meetings and in public hearings that was something that the public and the board all wanted was, you know, that there would be the diversity, that two houses next to each other wouldn't be the
Mhm.
same or across the street from each other.
Right.
So I think that's something that to pass along that we would like to, I mean, well, I'm just speaking for myself, but that I'd like to see maintained.
Right, some
And
diversity.
if we're taking a run at drafting this, the typical reference point is what we call a lookalike clause, and we try to draft in there so that we don't have two homes next to each other that are identical. There's got to be some architectural deviation. So we're happy to work with you on that.
Oh, great. I thought I had seen some change to that in the what we were sent. So, okay, good.
Could be. Lots of details here.
So these are, just as a reminder to everybody, these are the styles. And again, a lot of the changes have to do with the vinyl. Changing windows that aren't necessarily specific to what, you know, maybe consistent with what this design is, but perhaps it's a more modern version. You know, again, vinyl, I think that's really.
Bonnie, we're still
also,
seeing
Can we
we're still
bring-
seeing
yeah.
Oakland. So if you're
Really?
pointing things
Yeah.
out,
let me stop sharing and let me reshare. You should be seeing design standards. Okay. Okay, so I was just really scrolling through here to see the different, we were on French Country. Here's your Hudson River Dutch style. And that that home that's in another example is Warwick Grove, where they built the houses to, I think Warwick Grove is a good example of what was intended for Tuxedo Farms back in the day.
Absolutely.
And so there's actually a house that looks a lot like this Dutch gambrel, but it's a modern version of it. I think they actually had just pitched roofs, but they somehow articulated the roof line to make it appear like a Dutch gambrel, but it's not a true Dutch gambrel.
And also, Bonnie, as you're going through, I know that some of the styles of these houses, not this Gothic one you're showing now, but some of the other ones, you know, they look like the estate homes. Whereas at the bottom, if you scroll up just a tiny bit, at the bottom of each one, you see what the cottage version of that style would look like.
Right.
And I
So-
think that's what we'll get more of is the cottage and village styles, you know, and just a few of the manor and estates. But that's fine. It's just, you know, it's just how you take that idea and then make it into something that fits this development.
Right. And that's exactly what that did show, were because you had different lot sizes in different neighborhoods, different price points is going up to the estate size lot. These were little samples of what and how that particular style could be applied to the different lot sizes.
Right.
And different size homes. So same thing here was your Hudson River Gothic.
And that would be more the cottage style, so. Right?
Yep. And cottage, not meaning cottage lot, but
Right.
cottage style, right. And then the shingle style. Did you have a comment about the fireplace, Michelle?
Yeah, there was it was all the about all the chimneys for each style. This wording was added, or direct vent fireplace with venting to the rear or side of home. And I'm just wondering what that means and what that would look like. Does that mean you wouldn't have any visible chimneys? I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah, if you don't mind me jumping back in.
Yeah,
Yes,
please.
at its heart, it would mean you may not have a visible chimney, or if you do have a chimney, it wouldn't be, it would be a false chimney. It would just be a design element because the fireplace would just vent out of a vent that you might say looks like a dryer vent almost, a flap so that you wouldn't need an entire chimney. And the fireplace would be in the home, not protruding out of the home.
And these are mostly for gas fireplaces.
Oh, 100%. Yes. Yeah, they wouldn't be for wood burning. Correct. Yes. We'd never be able to do that with wood burning.
Right.
I think
And you can, sorry, go
yes,
ahead.
go ahead, Bonnie. All right, I'll go. I think that there are two issues being conflated here. One is, how do you functionally vent a combustion device in the home? And traditionally that's with a big pile of bricks with a hole in the middle of it. But with modern fireplaces, we don't do it that way. So having a direct vent in a way that is not ugly is probably acceptable. But again, we're trying to maintain a certain style here, and a lot of these, Hudson Valley style homes have chimneys, and they're a major part of their design. And I think it would look very strange to have all of these houses with no chimneys. Whether they're functional or not is a different question.
And just another one of those topics, Jay, that we may not see eye to eye on for the moment, but we'd like the opportunity to work through it if possible.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, and yes, I'm open to but show me something that looks nice.
Ken brought up a point, and I just wanted to ask this: are we this project is definitely being served by gas, and where is the gas coming in from? Is it being extended from Sloatsburg? We'll definitely have gas mains within the project because it's a big project.
I don't have an answer for you at that level of
think
utility
that is-
detail.
That's the case. I think, believe that it's always been planned. I think the utility company is ready to do that.
Okay. I just don't recall if it's in Sloatsburg already, so it's just a matter of extending it into the project.
I don't know for sure because we haven't really gotten there, but although we have reached out to them, I
Okay.
think it's been planned and it's not been highlighted as an issue at all.
Okay.
There's another thing that's common through all the different styles is a reduction from 8.5 to 8 feet on the second floor. And is that definitely something that you need, or why was that
That's-
added?
That's how we build our homes, with the 9 foot on the first floor and the 8 foot on the second floor. It's just not 8 foot 6 inches. So that's why we're making that adjustment. I'm not sure what the purpose of the additional half a foot was, but that's not our building style.
I think it was just, again, probably the quality, the custom builder, you know, that you typically maybe do 8.5, higher ceilings. I think that's what that was about. Because it seems to be throughout all the design standards. So I don't know that it's specific to a design type.
Right, it's
Architecture
throughout
up-
every, yeah, it's
Yeah.
every style.
Yeah, I don't know that was an architectural style.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of them doesn't have it, but that doesn't mean anything.
Oh,
Oh, yes, here, Greek Revival.
well, it says it already is 8 feet.
Yeah, 8 feet on the second.
Higher ceilings are a mark of higher quality. Everybody knows that. It's like having an amp that goes up to 11.
Hey, I got one of those.
Do we want to talk about these returns, the eaves,
Do we want to wait until we have more,
more images? We can.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Let's wait on that.
Okay.
I agree. I don't like the pork chop.
Yeah, okay. I mean,
This here.
Isn't that what it calls, the pork chop? Yeah, the pork chop. I remember that. Yeah.
Garage doors. So I
What
think
was
there's
this that was crossed out? It's hard to read.
this is a question of whether you're going to have true divided lights or simulated divided lights or internal grills or external grills.
Correct. And we
Window.
wanted to preserve the right to have the interior divided window panes.
Well, do you have any styles that have the applied?
applied on the inside
No, well,
because this says actually exterior face of the light.
It shows both. It shows just
Yeah.
grills between the planes or just grills on the outside.
So our sweet spot is the middle of the X, where we would typically have a dividers in between the two panes of glass. So again, we're trying to shoehorn in, how do we deal with these codes with our homes? So in some cases, you see this big X, perhaps we should have made a smaller X right on the middle, and then it would be a double negative, not permitted, but it has an X through it, which means permitted. And good luck to the planning board in following us down the road.
Yeah, I think in the end, if you wanted to allow this, you would just pull the whole image out.
Well, right. So
But the discussion is about windows and the quality of them and,
So then, I don't mean to harp on this, but it feels like we're circling back to let's let this be home style driven and then jump back to a detail draft.
Yep.
So we capture these kind of things and don't have crossouts that create double negatives.
I agree with that. And
Can you scroll back up, Bonnie? I wanted to see if there were changes to the shutters.
some of these decisions will definitely be
Error.
driven by price points.
Oh, absolutely. Our remember the conversation. We want to have a diversity of home styles to create a diversity of price points, and sometimes design standards, which look great and feel great, are then drive dollars, which drive us out of the right price points for that middle group that we want to cover with our community.
I mean, when I was building my house, I had to tell my builder, look, don't just show my wife the most expensive stuff that's possible, because I have a budget that we have to live with. It wasn't meant to be funny or anything. It was like, listen, you promise her a Maserati and I can only deliver, a Lexus or whatever, then everything seems like a deficit model, as opposed to no. This is an upgrade from most people's affordability, and a community that we could build that could be inhabited and populated not 30 years down the road. So those are all really important factors. I picked the best that I could with the budget that I had, and with things like maintenance factors. So yeah, I do have vinyl siding in the eaves of my house. Yeah, I did hardy plank, but now I do see homes that are built with insulated. I also did tried for Energy Star purposes, but those are the decisions I had to make. But I was doing a one-off home. But you got to factor all those things into a price point, a design, and I'm shutting up now.
Well, is it possible to have the shutters the way originally intended?
Well, so as you can see, we crossed out the line that talked about that the shutters had to be half of the size of the window dimension. Our shutters are, and I don't have the exact dimension in my head, but our shutters are a very standard size, and they're not tailored to the different window sizes. And we weren't trying to convey that you could close them in a storm event and cover your window. They may look like they can be closed, but we weren't trying to create the illusion that it would ever cover your entire window. So that's why we
Again, it
crossed
would
that
be
out.
great to see. So
But
it
of course.
wouldn't look like this. That's not permitted.
So the standard was shutters should be operable or appear operable. And so to appear operable, they have to cover half the window. And so applicant is not proposing to size them half, the width of the window.
But let's also remember, shutters that are functional and can cover your window only work if you have window sizes typical to 1850. The minute you start having modern houses with double wide windows, you're not putting shutters on that can cover that window. I mean,
that's the image that you see right here.
Right.
Not permitted.
Okay, but it says not permitted, but that's fine. But there's a special word for it that I can never remember. One of the architects in the room can help out. But they are architectural features that are vestiges of former structural requirements, like the 3 lines in a classic Greek facade, which are the visual signal of the ends of the wooden beams that used to be there, or the wood paneling on a station wagon. So if we're going to allow some modernization of the Hudson Valley style to make this project work, full width shutters may not be possible if we're going to have the kind of large glazing that we're asking for and that people want.
The issue is it aesthetically pleasing? I mean, that's really the issue. And until we see product, we're just gonna talk about
Right.
things that nobody really can see. So
Right.
really
It's,
need to see the
Exactly.
design to make sure that it is aesthetically pleasing.
And hopefully aesthetically pleasing to the person who buys it.
That's the point. To the, what I liked isn't really important. It's really, does it have a general style that is marketable?
Right. I mean, this project didn't anticipate double hung windows. So that's why it had a shutter requirement, because you wouldn't have double hung windows, and you would have windows that were sized, if you had shutters, that they would look authentic. That's what the Tuxedo Farms of the past was. Here, the porches and porticos, the 8-foot deep porch, again, came out of the concept of these form-based codes and creating traditional neighborhoods. And the idea was that you would be out on your porch and you'd interact with your neighbors on the sidewalk. And 6-foot deep porches really are more aesthetic than they are usable, and the 8 feet are more usable. And that's what the intent of this was. And so applicants proposing 6 feet. But
Right,
again,
but
the-
again,
the intent was, I'm just telling you the intent, Jay, of what was, whether you allow it now or not, or care about it, that was the intent. But it's this traditional neighborhood design concept. The
looks like
T&D
Warwick
concepts.
Grove, actually, those
This one?
pictures.
Could be.
but I
Yeah, that
understand
one, yeah.
why a 6-foot porch might be attractive, because that's 2 feet more living room. And nostalgia aside, most people in the summertime spend their time in the living room where the air conditioning is.
Um,
I don't.
I
So-
think you have to, if you go to a T&D neighborhood, it's a different environment.
It's a lot of personal preference, and I'll tell you, whenever we have
Yeah.
outdoor living space, 9 times out of 10, the buyer will say, "Hey, can we convert that to indoor space? Because we expect to be in our house more than in an outdoor area. We can always sit on the lawn if we needed to, or our patio." So, Jay, you hit the nail on the head. We will minimize that by going it back to 6 feet, because we know that the folks would like it in their home. But we could debate that for sure.
But to prove that, if the lot allowed, would you make that an option? If you wanted a 6-foot porch or an 8-foot porch, you could have it.
Not, and that's a big picture question. Not necessarily, because we're not looking to create exterior design changes with extra rooms, with extra porches. We don't want to torture your building department, and we want to make sure that we're offering our homes the way we know that the folks will want them. So it's our job to know what the market will want.
Okay.
So we would try to minimize those exterior bump outs, even though I threw that out at the very beginning of the conversation as an option. It's certainly nothing that we typically try to do, whether it's on a porch or another room.
Thank you.
But also, is the intention here to build a bunch of houses and then try to sell them, or are you going to be doing this as pick your model and then we're going to build it? Or is that too soon to ask?
No. That it's an interesting question, and think of it in terms of, do we build, sell, close, or sell, build, close? Very subtle difference. In a perfect world, we're building the home that we know the home buyer wants, and then we sell the home and then we close it. Others might take a more custom look at it and say, no, we'll sell, let the home buyer get involved in the home design and then build it. So our model is more to build, sell, and close. But people do get ahead of us and pick a home on a lot where we haven't built it, and we do get into those opportunities for some changes, but we do like to minimize that, because it's our job to know what the home buyer wants.
Our
So
clock is saying we're it's a 1:45 burnout time on my watch. I guess I'd kind of want to leave in the end of this as to what did we learn from this, and where are we going next?
I think we've been discussing that the town board wants to see more product that's going to be specific to Tuxedo Farms. I think Mitch said, go that, go to the high level, see what's being constructed, samples of the materials, design and aesthetics. And then, once the town board understands what the product is and agrees, and you could, talk and discuss what is changeable and what is not, then drill down to the design guidelines and the smart code. Because we're going details when, the town board still isn't entirely, I think, confident of the building type and the variations on the design of the building type.
Well, I think more to it than that. We have a design code that doesn't address the majority of the building types of this development. Right? I mean, there's no townhouse in these design standards.
Yeah, they're
Unless I
townhouses,
missed
but
it.
they're townhouses, but they may not match these townhouses, this specific design.
I see duplexes. I see. Anyway.
Yep.
So.
What wasn't clear to me was, so are we getting a revised version of this, or are they coming up with a new smart code, or have we made a decision about that, or are we waiting to see the product before a decision about that is made?
Brad looks like he has something to say about that.
Yeah, I think we're a little too early to tell. I think let's work with Mitch and Greg to come up with some of the images, and then we'll figure out, is it a tweak to, a more substantive tweak to what already exists, or is it more of the overhaul? So let us punt on that if we can and deal with the images in the first instance.
But what I'd like to say, I don't think this was a waste of time in any way. I think if we didn't go through this process tonight, we would have hit a cliff later on that would have been much more shock and awe. People would have been, wait a minute, I thought you were going to, because I'll tell you, I look at these design standards and I'm looking at these images, and this always bothered me, that these images that are in here are not current to what I think this project's going to end up looking like. And although we want to use elements of style that Bonnie was showing in that home, how do you make an English country style on a modern home? Okay, there'll be elements of style. I think Mitch and I were discussing that kind of a notion. But if we're not buying into what Lennar builds, then we're the Cinderella syndrome. We have the wrong shoe, the wrong foot, and that'll never work. So I think this was very productive, and we've always been asking for images of what the product would look like, and I'm confident that we'll get something back from you guys that we can really respond to, and I expect positively.
Thank you, Ken. I thought I was on mute. No, we're with you 100% on that summary, and I think the theme is we're going to work together cooperatively, but we have to start with a different method. We started with the details. Let's go back and start with the homes.
And I understand that related is more on the vertical design of the town square. And again, that to me drives, that's the one part. I'd have to be invited into somebody's home to see what's there. But this new part of Tuxedo is what's most interesting to me, because that's where I'm going to go. Hopefully I'll make friends with some of those new residents, and I'll send them, a basket of fruit or whatever. But, I don't need their permission to go into the town square and play tennis in there or whatever, hopefully. And, that's what's going to bring all of Tuxedo together. So I think that's what's going to really drive what this community is all about.
Yep. Yeah, we're working on that. And like I said, the design standards are not really changing for that. So that is sort of what it was, essentially.
Yeah, I think that's an important part, Ken, of what this project was about, was linking neighborhoods, because we have Eagle Valley all the way in the south, and this would allow the connection through Eagle Valley Road to get into this development and out toward the hamlet without having to go all the way to 17 and have interconnected neighborhoods to the extent you could. So that is part of the theme of what Tuxedo Farms and why the spine roads are public, to allow those connections.
You know, I don't want another secluded neighborhood that I can't go in. You know, I want it to be this. This has to be an extension of Tuxedo. That and you know, it's spread out wide enough that there can be diversity of how the neighborhoods look. You know, it's not, no offense, central New Jersey where or anywhere that's just flat. You know, there's all kinds of topographical differences in this community, and we need to take advantage of that. I don't think there's going to be a line of sight that you just look down and you see, you know, just replicated sameness. So just by that factor, you have a lot of opportunity to segregate looks and have some diversity.
Well said. We'll take that into consideration as we're coming back. Thank you.
Is that the phrase we're ending on? Because you know,
No,
I did my best.
All right, well, first of all, well, from the applicant's perspective, from Lennar's perspective, I think you said it very well. This was a great opportunity to change the direction of the conversation for a lot of good reasons. So I think this was a fantastic next step, and that's the way it goes. I think Larry might have said it, or somebody said it. We're going to ebb and flow, and we're going to have opportunities of shaking hands and opportunities of staring contests, but at the end, we're going to come together. And this is another step in that cooperative process. So we do appreciate everyone's time and effort and getting us to find the right path. So in that respect, this was a fantastic meeting. Thank you.
Okay, so before we depart tonight, folks, just a reminder that March 3rd, I believe, is the next scheduled workshop session.
You are correct, sir.
And I believe we are anticipating a revision to the tech memo for discussion at that meeting. So do you guys want to bring us up to speed where you are on that revision and when you might be able to get that to us to take a look at in advance of the meeting?
Larry, I don't have a firm date for you. I think that from our perspective, the first thing we have to do is get more settled in our home prices, because that's a driving element to what Ashley has to put into the tech memo, and we haven't gotten there yet. So how quickly we're going to do that, I do not want to be the overpromise and underdeliver person that we sometimes have to be. So we'll have to get back to you on that. I apologize for not having a better answer.
All right, then please stay in touch, and so we know whether, you know, we have something ready for the March 3rd meeting.
Oh, absolutely. If for some reason we are at a point where we don't have anything substantive, we'll certainly let you know in advance. And
how about some of the visuals, Mitch? Is that a possibility?
It is, but I want to work with our architect team to make sure that I can deliver by then. But you're saying exactly what I was thinking. Can we be ready by then to put some more meat on the bones? And I also have to caucus with Greg to see how far we can get along with some of the designs for the buildings that'll be in the commons section.
So let me pose something to this group. If it wasn't the 3rd, would the 10th work? We needed another week. It's just the next Thursday after that.
It's okay from the applicant's perspective on it.
That works for me so far, anyway.
Yeah, it's fine.
Can't,
with me.
I
That
have a
works for
meeting.
me.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm
Bonnie's
okay
got a
with that.
meeting.
You could still have it without me, but I have a
don't-
meeting.
I don't think so.
I have my own planning board meeting, so I'd be in hot water if I don't go.
Is there another night that week, Bonnie, that makes sense for you?
That night, I mean, that week, I believe the 9th is okay.
The 9th is the
A Wednesday.
town board.
Yeah,
Oh,
town board.
okay.
Oh,
That's Wednesday, right?
yeah,
I think I'm in the
the
right
9th won't
March.
work for me. I already know that I'm booked with my other gig on that one.
And then the 17th is open.
That's
That's the
St.
following.
Patty's Day. That's St. Patty's Day, my dear.
Then
Unless you're passing out beers, I don't know if we'll be there.
we should meet in person.
And
There you
we
go.
You might be able to
we
get me
already
that
booked
day.
this. We booked the 17th already, according to. Oh no, sorry, that's today. Never mind.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, I mean, it depends what it is on the 3rd, as to how important it is for Bonnie to be there. It's
Well,
always
she would
important
talk
for
to
her.
set the 10th if she couldn't be there.
So let
I could
Yeah.
do the 4th, but it's a Friday.
let's take a pause. Let's see where we are closer to the time, and then see if we're having a discussion about an alternate meeting or not.
Okay,
So far, the only person that couldn't make it would be Bonnie. And if it was a topic, if we were just looking at things, probably Bonnie could look at them at a later date.
and
I
you
could
can,
watch the video.
yeah, you can record the meeting and she can watch.
There
the
you go.
video.
And I'll throw this out. When there are very big projects and very big changes, sometimes the only time people can get together are on a Saturday. I can do weekends. You may not want to do weekends, but that does happen from time to time when you really want to get something done. So I'll throw that out there.
I'm fine with it. I don't know what a weekend is anymore, so it's just
Well, when
another.
are we, what's the timeline for the revisions to the special permit?
They don't know.
I was just.
Well, the
thinking we
special
got
permit
started on
or
that.
the tech memo, I'm sorry.
Oh, the special permit will not be revised until these issues
Anything
get
else?
are settled to a degree that Brad and I feel that we can, revise them in a way that we don't have to keep revising them again and again. So
Okay,
we
that
want
makes
to make
sense.
sure it's, we do it efficiently.
Okay.
I think if you meet on the 10th and you're talking about styles and designs and aesthetics, I don't know that I need to be there. I mean, that's really a town board decision in terms of what you think is appropriate or not. And I can join and I can watch the video, at a later date. Because then I'll know if everybody agrees to what is reasonable as far as designs and concepts, then where I get involved is in making sure the document is reflecting what you all decided was appropriate.
And I doubt that would be a 3-hour show and tell. But maybe I'm wrong.
Well, Ken, if you're right, if you're right, then maybe if we start a little earlier, Bonnie, I don't know what your or everyone's availability is a little bit earlier than on the 10th.
Well, actually, so my meeting starts at 7:15. So if we go earlier, if we were to do like a 4 to 7, that'd be perfect for me. I don't know if people get home or if they're working still. And I can also join at least from 5 to 7. I forgot that we meet at 5.
I think it's Jay and
workshop, so I
Maria,
could do 5 to
and
7.
I think Deirdre, they're the, I have way more flexibility. I just work for the town and my grandkids at this point.
I can work it out, no worries.
Yeah, I think I can work. I mean, I might be a couple minutes late if there's traffic coming home, but I usually can get here by 4 if I need to.
Okay, 4:30 probably could be a safe bet, right?
Yeah, 4:30 is perfect. It's good.
Jay,
All
were
right, so
you okay with that?
I'll put down 4:30.
Sure.
But we're not sure about the 3rd, right? Because we were talking tech memo. It might not be ready, right? And then
What about the market study? Would that be ready to talk about or present?
Interesting question. I wasn't intending on presenting it. I was intending on putting the data in the context of the tech memo.
Okay. I mean, I don't know that we need one. I was just curious about where that was.
Yeah, I think we would only need to look at that if we question the credibility of the price points. So let's see what the product is and the price points are, and we'll take it from there on that one.
So to close this, so we will keep the third on the books, pending applicants' readiness with the tech memo adjustments. And we have the 10th penciled in at 4:30 with the tentative subject of visuals. Does that work?
Yes.
And then, of course, if other things are available, we'll add them to the 10th. But it's hard to, as long as you have something on the calendar, at least, you know, you're not trying to herd cats, you know, at least you're ready to go. So I
Okay, so
find
the-
that.
Would it make sense if everybody visits Solnar's website, I know you have them across the country, but you know, there are some states that are more New York and some housing product that even if it's in Colorado, may still look more New York in terms of style. If the town board has a chance to look at it and likes particular styles, would it be beneficial to kind of send those, let's say, to Lisa, to get a sense of what would work? Is that useful or not really?
Well, Bonnie, I've banned you from going to our website, actually. We could do that. My preference is to go the other way, is for us to make a presentation based on
Okay.
what we believe would be the right fit here. We do have your input, but of course, if somebody wants us to have something of particular importance to them in a design feature, we would happy to consider it. But our thinking was we would start with where we think we need to go. But if there's something you'd like us to focus on, absolutely, you or anyone else are welcome to send it along.
I'll be coming back with a lot of photos, Mitch, from
Your band also.
No, I'm talking about from my trip to New Jersey.
Oh, okay.
These are going to be real product shots.
So I just want to confirm, we're off for the 3rd and on for the 10th.
No, I have it that we're on for the 3rd only. We're keeping it on the calendar, but if Mitch and Greg come back and say, well, we're not ready for you, hopefully they'll let us know at least a couple of days in advance so that we can all plan a party for our own selves.
So we're on for the 3rd with 10 as a backup.
Yes.
10, a 4:30 backup. Correct, sir.
Okay.
All right.
Yep.
All right. I'm
Sounds
about
good.
to make a motion to adjourn, but I think somebody else wants to talk. I'm not sure. Have a popular adjournment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
7:59. Wow. Do we really? Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank
Aye.
you.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Appreciate it. Bye.